disruptive.
America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen. So, folks, we got to talk back about what happened with the Daily Wire and Candace Owens. That now that the news came out that she was fired from the network or from the publisher, whatever you like to refer to as. Ben Shapiro refers it to publisher, and that's why Ben Shapiro right now is doing media rounds to try to defend his actions by saying that firing Candace Owens was a measure not of his, even though he's a co-owner of the supposed network. It was not his decision, and this is the decision of a publisher, and just goes into this knotted pretzel formation of trying to defend the fact that he's such a free speech advocate, but having a black woman host of your network is apparently controversial. And people still don't really know what exactly was the tipping point. We have some ideas. I truly believe that it's something to do with the fact that Candace Owens was kind of outspoken when it came to the Israeli genocide, when she was outspoken for support about Palestinians and openly stated that this is a genocide, genocide is a genocide, because outside of the Daily Wire, she's been featured on Patrick Bet-David's podcast. She went on to Destiny's show and destroyed him by saying exactly what we're saying here, that genocide is a genocide. What Israel's doing is in fact war crimes, and Israeli publications have even come forward to admit to that. So here's Ben Shapiro being interviewed by Dave Rubin, and Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro have already had a back and forth. I remember that the last time they had an interview, there was back and forth debate about gay marriage, and Dave Rubin wanted Ben Shapiro to come to his wedding. I don't know why. I feel like that'd be a terrible idea for Ben Shapiro as a guest at your gay wedding. And Ben Shapiro wouldn't budge, and he tried to nod himself into a pretzel and be like, "No, I accept you guys, but I'm not gonna go to this wedding because I think the wedding and gay marriage in general is just icky and ucky." So this is Ben Shapiro once again trying to do the exact same thing, nod himself into a pretzel by defending his action of firing Candace Owens, but then still championing free speech. So this is where kind of the right wing hypocrisy opens up when it comes to free expression, because we see a lot what's happening with the left, the blue hair college students that want to cancel out people in college campuses for speaking. But this is when the right wing takes action, and you can see hypocrisy on both grounds. This is where censorship truly is not a left versus right issue. It's basically authoritarian versus libertarian. Do we want to live in a free, accepting society and tolerate different viewpoints, or do we want control? Do we want control to better our causes, to better our personal agenda, and do vendettas against people? So watch this.
Let's do the elephant in the room for just a moment, because I saw you this week on Piers Morgan. He asked you repeatedly about Candace. You repeatedly basically said,
I won't talk about that. I'll say that here too.
Yeah, and that's fine. And it's interesting because we all sort of came up together to different extents, and we've all done a million things together in public events and networks and all of those things.
Which, by the way, so Dave Rubin mentions about Ben Shapiro before he did this interview with him, went on to Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, I'm pretty sure, was going to bring up Candace Owens. I'm pretty sure Ben Shapiro would have known that was going to be controversial, because that was a huge revelating moment when it came to the Daily Wire. It was all over social media. People were talking about that Candace Owens got fired for a controversial take. They never did say what that controversial take is, because if people knew exactly why Candace Owens got fired, then people would understand that Ben Shapiro is a hypocrite. They would understand that Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire are a bunch of right-wing hypocrites, and they're pro-Israel, they're pro-genocide. So them firing Candace Owens and saying that they're a free speech platform for any, for people that are kicked out of the left hemisphere of politics is a joke. It's a hypocrisy. It's a front. But they will never tell you exactly why Candace Owens got fired. That's why everything's all speculation, we go into theories. I strongly believe that that is the case. Like, watch Ben Shapiro try to twist himself into a pretzel to defend firing one of his employees and then say he's for free speech.
It seems to me that at this moment, she's now a free agent. She happened to end up on Locals, which I created, and they were a platform, not a publisher that you guys are. Can you at least talk to just sort of where it's at now? She's not with you. She's free.
She's free to do whatever she wants to do, to be wherever she wants to be. And the difference between a publisher like the Daily Wire and a platform like Locals is obviously that a platform should have a very broad range of speech that it allows, including speech that maybe even the creators don't believe is inside what they would consider to be the Overton window. It's a very different thing than direct subsidization of particular opinions. So the Daily Wire would not have a host, would not pay a host who was staunchly pro-abortion. They would have no obligation to pay a host who is staunchly pro-abortion. And so when it comes to the hosts on the Daily Wire, obviously everyone is able to say what they want. Nobody ever comes to me and says, you can't say X. Nobody ever says that to Walsh. And no one ever said that to Candace. But the reality is that there is an Overton window at the Daily Wire. Obviously, there was a non-meeting of the minds. That's pretty much all I can say on this.
Am I the...
So that's such a contradicting take there. Because Ben Shapiro is saying that, well, the Daily Wire is a publisher, and compare that to a platform like yours, Dave Rubin, is that a publisher, yeah, you can say whatever you want, but it has to be within this box. It has to be contained within the Overton window. That, again, you're contradicting yourself by doing that. You're contradicting yourself by openly stating that you're a free speech publisher and you want people to say what they want on their individual shows, but it has to be within this guard. It has to be within the Overton window. And sadly, that's happening with platforms these days. And this is where the controversy of what, YouTube and Facebook and social media platforms, which they're supposed to be regarded as platforms, are trying to do the ruling of being a publisher. They're trying to contradict what people are saying on these platforms by saying that there's misinformation, that we need to, hide certain content. We need to delete different accounts. This has been going on for a long while, and this has been the hotbed of this controversy, whether, social media needs to be considered a platform, being an open speech advocate, or if it's truly just this publisher that is trying to gain controls and abilities of being a platform by leading people on to their websites. And that's where I do believe it was 239, Act 239. I forget the name of the exact bill. That was the one that Trump was trying to rally up, was the fact that right before he created Truth Social, was we need to put this into perspective. We need to have a ruling that says if social media is going to be a social media platform, then they need to act and they need to serve as a platform. They cannot be publishers. They cannot dictate over what is being said, what people are posting, and what content is being provided on said platform. If they're going to be platforms, they need to act like platforms. And if they're going to be publishers, then they need to identify as publishers and stop referring to it as a free speech platform, because it's not. And that's contradicting the whole notion of what free speech is and what social media, a platform, is supposed to be. But here's Ben Shapiro, again, saying that he's a free speech advocate. He cares about other people's... No one's ever came out to me and asked for my permission, like The Godfather, to say this stuff. They can do what they want, but you got to say it within the window. We got to have these little meetings, and it's got to be within the window. Like, he is a whiny weasel. He is a goddamn whiny weasel. And he's a whiny weasel who sells himself out every single day, whores himself out to whatever corporation, intelligence service. There's even speculation that he's part of the Mossad regime. of the intelligence in Israel, and that's why he's so pro-genocide. That's why he's pushing so much of this, even though he contradicts himself, even on the perspective of Israel, because he once said that America didn't need to help this country, and they didn't need the support. Israel can defend itself. And yet here we are, as October 7th happened, all of a sudden now America has to drop everything and send everything over to Israel. Israel has to be the top priority of everything, not homelessness, not the opioid epidemic, not cost of living, not the energy concern. None of that have to matter. And he will yell and scream and shout at the top of his lungs that if you don't care about it, somehow you're anti-Semitic. If that's not your top priority, to slaughter innocent children overseas. And sending your tax dollars to do so. So here's this guy, Mario Nafal, who says that exposed Candace may have been fired for saying Christ is king. 4 Daily Wire employees revealed that they're ordered to attend a meeting where they were all subject to propaganda from Ben Shapiro regarding Candace Owens allegedly being an anti-Semite for saying Christ is king. The employees said they felt the tone of the meeting was threatening and are considering filing a lawsuit against the organization. So, if that is the case, and again, this is where it's overreaching for a lot of these corporations, that first of all, they knew getting Candace Owens on that she's a devoted Christian. They knew from the get-go that Candace Owens, being a commentator that she is, has more Christian value claims. She has always preached for more of a Christian perspective. That's always been the case with Candace Owens. So when they hired her on to be on this platform, they would have known right off the bat that if she said Christ was king or had some contradicting views from Ben Shapiro's religious standpoint, they wouldn't have known this right away. So it's not shocking for Candace Owens to say that Christ is king. And also, why would a corporation need to dictate over someone's religious belief? Like, this is where this comes in. This is where I just get so ticked off and annoyed by this. It's not like an employer is going to ask you in an interview, if you're applying for a job, oh, what religion are you? And if they say that you're, if you say, you're a Christian or Catholic or Jewish or an atheist or Buddhist or whatever you are, it's not going to be like, oh, well, we need to hire more Christians, so we're going to hire you on. Oh, we need to hire more Catholics, we're going to hire you on. Oh, we can't hire you because you're this. Oh, we can't hire you because of this. Like, this is where the identity crap just absolutely destroys the whole ideals of a workplace environment. Like, when you get so overwhelmed, when you get so over digest with all the speculation of person's identity versus the content of their character or what they're actually capable of, it's so ridiculous. It's so absolutely ridiculous. That they're gonna fire someone because they're Christian. Well, were they a good employee or a bad employee? Like, whatever religion they are, whatever gender or sexual orientation, like that should not even be in question. Not even be in question when it comes to an employee or an employee. Like, are they good at their job? Can they, do a good performance? Can they, be on time? Are they punctual? Are they responsible for the work? Are they good with the coworkers? Like, those are proper questions. Be asking that. So it could very well be that is the case. But now here's Ben Shapiro, after the controversy, after exposing himself for basically being being a censor for Candace Owens, saying that, the Daily Wire is a publication and not a platform, so they're allowed to do this, even though it's supposed to be a free speech network. Like, we hear all different voices and different opinions. No one ever comes up to me and asks if I'm allowed to say this. I'm definitely a free speech advocate, but I'm going to silence someone like Candace Owens because tiny little perspective when it came to the Israel-Gaza genocide. Now here's Ben Shapiro, again, trying to hide all that up, trying to cover himself up by once again being the free speech advocate that he's trying to promote himself as, even though everyone knows what a hypocrite this guy is.
Well, folks, bad ideas that start in Europe eventually end up here in the United States. And the latest bad idea in Europe is that hate speech should be criminalized. This is something that is being pushed by the European Union. It's also been pushed now by Scotland. Scotland has a brand new hate crime law, which has come into force according to the BBC. This brand new hate crime law essentially criminalizes, quote, stirring up hatred relating to age, disability, religion, sexual orientation, transgender identity, or being intersex. The maximum penalty is a prison sentence of 7 years. Apparently, you're an offender if you behave in a manner that, quote, a reasonable person would consider to be threatening or abusive.
Isn't it interesting that he brings that up in a podcast, that because Scotland is criminalizing hate speech, which I'm against that. I agree with them. That is ridiculous that they're criminalizing people for their guard of hate speech, because there's no, first of all, it's the oligarchs that are dictating what is hate speech. So they can decide and overrule what they consider hate speech and then dictate and punish people for having a diverse opinion. That's just absolutely crazy and barbaric. So I agree with them on that. But isn't it amazing that he will say this about Scotland because it has to do with transgender rights? Well, when it comes to college campuses and people protesting for Palestine, saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free, end the occupation, ceasefire now, Ben Shapiro will have a heyday and say that we need to punish the schools. We need to have free speech laws eradicated from the schools that are supposedly promoting anti-Semitism, what he considers anti-Semitism. So again, this is the hypocrisy that's so open. So open. People can see it right in front of them. That Ben Shapiro is twisting himself in a pretzel every single day when he tries to defend himself as being this free speech advocate. Because I agree with them when it comes to Scotland, but I also agree that if you're going to be, staunched about criminalizing hate speech in Scotland because of transgenderism, then you have to have the same principle, the same morals and same ethics when it comes to college kids that are protesting against the genocide. That is the whole principle of free speech, and that is where people have fallen. They don't recognize free speech as a principle. That has to be across the board. Because if it's not across the board, then guess what? You're not free speech. You're not for free speech. You're for selective speech. You're for the safe spaces. That Ben Shapiro used to go to college campuses and yell at people that you can't have free speeches. Or you can't have safe spaces. Because free speech is supposed to triumph over all that. And if we don't have diverse opinions, we are not going to understand each other. We're going to have segregated society. Things are not going to flourish. We're not going to have prosperity. We're not going to have progress if we don't have diverse opinions. That's why it's so important to have the ability to share ideas, discuss ideas, even ones that you so hardly disagree with. If you hate the person so much and hate the person, what they're saying, you have to defend their free speech as much as someone else would defend your right of free speech. That is the whole principle effect to this. I defend Ben Shapiro's right to free speech. I defend Steven Crowder's right to free speech. I defend anyone at the Daily Wire's right to free speech. I may disagree with what they're saying, I'm contradicting what Ben Shapiro is saying right now. I think he's a slimy sleazeball weasel of a guy, but I'm not going to lock him up and imprison him because of something I disagree with him on. That's ridiculous. And that's because I'm a principled person. I'm a principled person that understands free speech has to be across the board. Unlike Ben Shapiro, who will advocate that he's for free speech. This is what the right always does. They'll advocate for free speech, which used to be a lefty idea. Now the right has taken over because the left is just completely consolidated with authoritarianism. The right will say that, hey, I'm for free speech. But then something controversial happens and they completely lose their bottom edge. Now they're just being the hypocrites that the left are doing. So, this is exactly why, again, we gotta get away from this. We gotta get away from the left versus right and understand that the principle of free speech is about the principle of, it really is equality. It really is the basic necessities of what it means to be a human on this earth. Because if we don't have the ability to communicate towards one another without having, hate laws impact or social media sites being censored or your video taken down or having an angry mob try to cancel you, society is not going to function. Society is not going to progress. Think of all the, innovations that human beings were able to do. And that's because it took people to discuss, to discuss ideas, to come up with their own hypothesis and come up with their own solutions. And some of them were contradicting, and some of them got angry, and back and forth. That's part of life. And that's what Ben Shapiro even used to say. And I kind of agreed with him on that. But I knew that was a front. Because this is the true Ben Shapiro. This is the whiny weasel inside that now he's angry that Candace Owens may have been outspoken and called a spade, and he's getting paranoid. And that's why Ben Shapiro fired her. And now is doing, media runs to twist himself in a pretzel, saying that, no, I'm still the free speech advocate, but Candace Owens getting fired. I can't talk about that because we're Republicans. Just an absolute hypocritical weasel. This guy is. I still allow him to speak. I still allow him to have the company that he has. I still allow him to, say his weaselly things. But I'm just going to call it out. Because that's what free speech is. I'm allowed to call out his BS. People are allowed to call it my BS. That's how the world works.